Superhero Talk Show. I'm your host, Brian West. Joining me today, of course, are my co-host, Mr. Greg Burrow from Dragons Air Comic and Fantasy, and Anastasia Anderson. We are talking this week about The Eternals. Marvel Comics
The Eternals.
Marvel Cinematic Universe's new offering in theaters now. Make sure you go check it out. It's actually a fun ride. We are going to be a little bit less kind on it today than we have been because
we have beef.
We have beef.
We have lots of beef.
We went the first couple of days, the first few days of the episode, as always, we've given you the comic book background and stuff like that.
I guess we need to preface this. Would I see it again? Yes, I would see it again.
Yeah, I would totally watch this again. Unfortunately...
I would play this again in the background while I did housework.
Well, and to be fair to everybody, because of the job we do, we always have to have a courtesy second watch.
Yeah, this is true.
This is one of those
Sometimes
ones.
we see things with a different. But
something tells me 5 years from now, when 8 other movies comes out, I'm gonna have to come back and watch.
There's a thing, and this is a common thing in comic books. A comic problem that comic books have had for a long time is that they will have events, action, things happen, stories, whatever, that are huge and expansive, but in the long run really have no effect on anything and end up kind of being pointless. Like you could just glaze over them. Superhero comics have done that forever. I can think of at least a dozen.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is
it's all a dream.
A lot of it, and it's not but it's all a dream. It's just that it was a big, interesting thing, but in the end, ultimately, it had no impact.
Well, it's like the 1950s sitcoms, you know. Whatever happened in the episode, by the end of the episode, everything had to be status quo.
Yeah,
so you could, like, in syndication, you could read them in any order, and anyone could jump in at any point and not be completely lost.
And if you're used to things like Infinity War and such as that, where, you know, it has obvious ramifications across the board, this did not. Now, the one thing that I expected from the beginning, if you've seen the commercials, you obviously know, they explain where they've been up until now. They explain why they haven't interfered until now. They were forbidden to do so, etc., etc. That's fine. But I knew going into this movie, they were going to have to figure out how to explain why they aren't involved going forward because, let's face it, you live in a world where somebody's pretty much got godlike power and can do anything. Once you break that precipice, once they started interfering,
right, the door's open, bro.
Yeah, you can't put that genie back in the bag. It's got to be a thing, you know. So that I knew they were going to have to get rid of him. Otherwise, they'd be solving all the problems for all of the Marvel characters going forward, and there'd be no point of having a Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, and it's like everybody needs to be traumatized because, spoiler alert, in the end, it's like basically they go through the whole thing where they're living in the shadows. And then in the end, what's his name? The Celestial comes out, just straight up pops up and is like, howdy, and steals them and then leaves.
Yeah,
and everybody's, and they show all the people on the ground going, what the hell was that?
So, anyway.
Atreus or...
Who?
Arishem? Arishem, that's
Arishem
it. I was saying
the Celestial's Arishem.
Yeah, Arishem just pops up like howdy and takes them and then leaves.
The other one is Tiamat. But anyway, so... I knew that was going to happen, so it did not surprise me when they started dying.
Yes.
Did not surprise me.
And it's all the ones you like.
What surprised me was actually that more of them did not die.
It's like all the ones you're going to like.
I expected more to die, because like I said, I knew going in that they were going to have to figure out how to get rid of most of them. Most of them, their time was numbered. So some of them leaving Earth on their own. Okay. Really, honestly, the only one I expected to stick around was Cersei. Because she's the only one who really played a major part as
She's the one who is an Avenger.
She was an Avenger and everything, and she interacted, and she, like, literally, her on the Avengers was her taking a stance of, screw this, I've got all this power and I live forever, you know, I might as well do something about it, and she joins the Avengers. So that's her thing in the comic book.
Well, and it's more, it's like, I was cool with the idea of them dying, but it's like, and I get story-wise why some of them had to die, but I wasn't expecting them to die in the order that they did.
Like I said, I was expecting much more carnage, so that was a pleasant surprise.
I mean, I was ready for them to just start.
So,
and they don't.
We're gonna start with Cersei. Cersei.
Oh, we're gonna start with Cersei.
Well, Cersei was obviously the most well connected with the people of Earth and the most in love with Earth as a planet.
Right.
Literally every scene she's interacting directly with the people.
That's why I knew she was going to stick around.
Because she's the people person.
That was her thing in the comic book. She loved the Earth. She loved the people. She wanted to be part of it. She wanted to protect it. It worked for me.
I'm still like, okay, I get that the romance stuff was part of it, but I'm like, I could leave it. I was very it's like I wasn't offended because some people were very offended by the Icarus Cersei to like very milquetoast scene, which I'm also confused because everyone was like, oh my god, what a tragedy, and I'm like, it's very milquetoast.
Yeah, and it's like the first.
If they didn't straight up say, by the way, they're having sex, you wouldn't have even processed that was what was
they're just
happening.
making out on the beach. It could have been.
Yeah, it's cute.
It's whatever.
It was cute.
It was supposed to be the first sex scene in a Marvel movie.
But I'm also like, I didn't care. I didn't care about the emotional connection because they didn't give me time to do it.
Yeah, that's true, but it does play into the story. So
it does contribute to the story.
But in the end, but I liked her. I liked her being the center character. I kind of expected her to be the center character. I expected her to be left over at the end, and so
she's
a lot
the
of
more
her
empathetic one.
Yeah,
so
and Gemma Chan was great. I loved her characterization.
Delightful.
I had to be reminded that she had already been in the Marvel Universe once before, because she played Dr. Minerva on Captain Marvel. But the blue skin thing made it different. So.
Right? It doesn't count if they're colored.
She was an alien, and she had a different skin, and she had a different personality and characterization. So you can double dip.
It's fine.
Which is fine.
It's fine.
But no, she was delightful.
I mean, how many characters has Patton Oswalt done by this?
Oh my gosh! Hold on.
Because he does another one in Eternals.
Right later.
We'll get to that. So yes, I
liked Gemma Chan. I think she did great.
I can't even say anything bad. I mean, I liked her character. I liked her story arc. It wasn't too whiny or angsty. Yes, there was.
I was surprised they could have been whiny.
Yeah, it could have been whiny and angsty, but it was like, the pressure of this, like, she got the, obviously nobody expected her to be the one left in charge, and then she gets left in charge, and she steps up to it,
Yeah.
And there was a couple of moments where, like, I was kind of getting irritated because it's like, oh, the man's got to protect her, and I can't let you get hurt, and you're not strong enough, blah, 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 blah. And, I was waiting for her to pull the whole, like, I'm strong enough to take care of myself. Well, she didn't have to say it. She didn't have to say, I'm strong enough to take care of myself. She just did it. She just did it.
She did. It's like she can, she did.
And again, I think this comes from having a female director.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference when it's a girl directing, making a girl character.
Yeah.
So I loved her. I loved her character.
I literally have nothing bad to say about her. She was fantastic.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, all the characters were really fantastic in their own ways. I mean, I felt like they each had depth and they each had their own story. Again, which is why I think it would have been better, like you're saying, in a Disney Plus series where you had like at least an hour episode
really
for each of them to
character.
really go in and delve into that character.
They had
because
good
they
concepts
were
to start
so
with.
good. Yeah, but they were so good, and it was like they were all on their A game. You know what I'm saying?
God.
I mean, Selma Hayek.
Yeah.
I was
Selma
just
Hayek's next.
I was just like, oh my God, she's amazing.
All right, so then we're going to go to...
And as I said, before the movie even came out, that I was the only reason that I was even interested in watching the Eternals because Selma Hayek was in. And I was like, okay, he wouldn't do crap.
Yeah, she's one of those people for me that if Selma Hayek shows up and so, I don't even care if it's bad.
It's
like,
actually funny. I love the interview when they were first talking to her, and they're asking her about when she was cast and everything, and she's like, when they contacted me to do this, I was certain they were going to make me play a grandma or something because she felt like she was that they were going to shoehorn her into like an old lady position. And she was so happy that they didn't do that. They didn't make her be like an old lady. I mean, they made her a maternal figure.
She is an older maternal figure,
definitely made her
she's
the
not
leader
an
of the
old
clan.
lady.
But she was so happy they didn't make her play an old lady.
Well, and she was such a... which that's the other reason I kind of wanted to see more of her, is that she's such like a beautiful, compassionate character.
Yes.
And I just,
But she was tough when she needed to be, though.
right, and then
She's like, no,
you see
I'm
her
the leader.
in these,
you do what I say.
Yeah, you see her in these gorgeous costumes, like the one where they're in Babylon. That was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then she died.
Yes.
And then she's
way
dead.
too early. Way too early.
Way too early.
But
don't fret. There's still plenty of flashbacks, so you still have plenty of Selma Hayek.
You will still see her in flashbacks.
She's not. Yeah. Don't take it as meaning she's only in the beginning of the movie because it's not.
Yeah. But I still am mad in spirit because they were like, oh yeah, by the way, these are flashbacks. And also, when you find out the way she died.
Okay.
Oh, don't. We're not going to spoil that.
We're not going to spoil that. We're not going to spoil that at all.
It's disappointing.
We will spoil lots.
We'll
but we
spoil a lot, but
it.
we won't spoil that.
You'll know what'll happen.
Never let it be said that Red Web does not have integrity. Okay, so
what?
Not that we'll deny it, but all right.
Right.
So moving on. Let's do Fastos next.
You know what? Yes, because I also love him. He's another one of those actors that I just love him in everything that he's in. And also, he had the most like dramatic kind of arc that could have turned in. It's like, and also had the sweetest scene with his husband and his child.
Yes.
Yeah, his journey was a real roller coaster.
Yeah.
That should have been an episode long of something.
Yes.
That literally was the one that like
made me think. Yeah.
Well, when we talk about how stuff does not have a payoff, he goes through an arc where basically the function of his character is that he's the one creating the technology to give to them. And one of the things that he gives is the bomb.
Yes.
That one.
He has a nuclear power, and they turn it into the bomb.
Yeah, and it's
like
that event.
he's like early on, like in the Babylonian age and stuff like that. He's like trying to give them steam engines.
He's
They're
so
like, no.
excited.
They're like, no, and then like so he goes, here, this is the plow, and they're like, that's perfect. That's exactly what we need to give them. And he's like, he's so upset because he wants to give them the steam engine.
Yeah, he's so genuinely passionate about this stuff, and the bombing of Nagasaki is the one that's supposed to have
Hiroshima.
broken it. It's
Hiroshima.
Both, but yeah, Hiroshima. It's like but that's supposed to be the thing that breaks his faith in humanity because, oh my God, they just did this really awful thing to each other. Why are we trying to save these people that are going to die anyway? But then the next time you see him, like basically you see the point where he breaks and he's crying and Ajax is consoling him. And then the next thing you know, he's got a husband and a child.
Well, of course, this is hundreds of years later.
But we really don't go through the thing.
70 years? 70 or 80 years?
Yeah.
40,
we
was it
just
45?
celebrated
We're in the 20s.
45, 46?
We're in the 20s, so it's like 75.
45, 46?
No.
I can't remember.
No,
Remember
it's
Hiroshima.
but
the point is that yes, his character at least was supposed to illustrate the philosophical quandary as to how involved they should be.
Yeah, it's like he's supposed to do that, and like I said, next time you see him, he's settled down, he's with his husband, he has a child, and it's like
happy.
Yeah, he's super content and happy, and he's willing to be like,
August
hey,
6, 1945.
Yeah, it was World War II, not World War One.
That's
It's
what
like
I said, 1945, 1946.
It's like, and so when it's like they have a lot of emotional arcs with characters where they're setting up that they're supposed to have these really big, complicated emotions about these things, and then they just sort of don't do anything about it. Like, they're like, yeah, no, he's perfectly happy, and then they're like, oh yeah, no, we need to save all of humanity, and they're like...
It was like you said, it was like you had said, it was the throwaway line of like, oh, so I thought you hated humans, and it's like, yes, and then I fell in love.
Yeah.
And that's
like, stuff like that
that's
happens.
Where they went off from it.
And I'm like, don't tell me.
Yeah, and whatever. Now, I do find it cool that it's the first like actually acknowledged gay couple on a
They're
Disney
so
show.
cute together too.
And they are really. There's really the family was sweet and adorable, and I'm so.
They have a very
loving that the director refused to edit it for foreign markets. They are getting blocked in some markets,
Yes.
And stuff for it. And Angelina Jolie is like super praising them for it and stuff. So
right.
And
well,
also, I mean, there's a couple of things I want to say really quick. First off,
sure.
I really like the fact that it was a real relationship.
Yes.
It wasn't
It
just
was a beautiful,
a
loving
token
relationship.
flag saying, here, this is what this is.
yeah,
Because he actually consoles and like actually
convinces him.
to go with the Eternals and help
Yeah.
save the planet.
That goodbye kiss as they're leaving for the final battle like nearly broke me.
Oh yeah.
And I usually am not a romance person, but that
And the
got
second
me.
thing that I really love is how much diversity was in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And it was near effortless too.
Yeah, it worked and it seemed real. It didn't seem forced.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one person that only speaks in sign language.
Well, let's talk about them next. Let's talk about.
And they go through the cultural costumes and they don't get offensive about
Right.
it. Like everybody gets it, because as they're going through each of them, they have their own cultural costumes that they wear of the cultures that they're in.
But they're living in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're living in it. It's like everything looks appropriate for what it is. Like I was impressed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Makari. Now,
Yes, Makari's the next one.
Makari's one of the gender swaps from the comic books, as we mentioned
gender
earlier. But also, they made her hearing impaired. And they used a real hearing impaired actress. I'm not familiar with her in anything else, but it was really fun watching them use the sign language, and all the other characters interact effortlessly with it.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing is they make a lot of those crossovers normal. Like she speaks in signs, and it's like she reads lips too, just because odds are when you've lived for that long at this point you
You're
are.
probably pretty good at it.
But like they're actively signing to her, and it's not a huge deal. Like they don't do it for comedy.
One of my favorite things is that they reveal how they explain in continuity the reason that she is deaf is because it protects her. If you notice in the movie, she broke the sound barrier every time she sped.
Yeah.
That's why. Okay.
Every time she used her super speed, she broke the sound barrier and created a sonic boom.
I love the way that they did her speed as well.
That was a really cool thing.
It was really kind of unique from what I've seen done before.
Well, that was very specific. I'd read an article that the director was talking about how, once you had two Quicksilvers come out in the same year, and after Flash being portrayed on the TV for so many years or whatever, you had Superman super speed. It was going back to, back in the 70s, there was this little show called The $6 Million Man, where they couldn't figure out how to represent his super speed, so they slowed everything down. And literally, there was like this whole thing, slow means fast, and that kind of set the stage for super speed later on. Yeah, exactly. And so that's how super speed has been portrayed for so long. And she's like, I want to do something like completely different. And I really liked it. We did not have to sit through a slow-mo frozen landscape.
Not another time in a bottle
$6
scene.
million Man that they also sped when he's on the track or whatever, and they speed it up.
Yeah.
And then they add smoke and stuff, so it looks like he's like burning the treadmill.
Still, the main thing was that started, and while it was hilariously funny I never liked it in the X-Men movies, the X-Men Quicksilver.
Yeah.
I never liked it simply because it's how do I explain this? It's like the '90s Godzilla movie. They didn't stop and think about scale, and so they just randomly start putting Godzilla and stuff, and so it's these different scales.
Yeah.
The speed was inconsistent. At this point, he's only fast enough to do this. If he was fast enough to do all that in the time that it was frozen and that thing, there's no excuse for him not to do anything at that point. Like, if you really think about it time-wise, that's way, way, way too fast. His clothes would be shredding off of him. Yeah. There's just the sheer vacuum he'd be creating would be knocking everything over. There's, it's just like, it wasn't consistent with me.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm very hard to suspend my disbelief because I've been watching this stuff since I was before I could talk.
That's like a payoff scene like 3 movies later. when
Yes,
he's
he
grown
builds
up,
up the speed. to
which
that or
is
something.
what they do with the Flash, where they start developing everything.
No, that's where I got tired of the Flash too. It's just like, oh, he has to get faster. I'm like, seriously, dude, you've done stuff faster than this like 20 times, like,
Right.
this season alone.
It's like, but yeah, I liked her visually. The whole thing with her and Druid comes out of nowhere, but I'm like, it's like they give you a scene in the before times, they give you a scene in the after times where he's like, hey, sexy, and I'm like,
Okay.
what?
So now we're going to talk about Druid. Druid is played by Barry. I can't pronounce his last name. Now,
Not
you-
Ezra Miller.
Not Ezra Miller, which is really funny because I was actually watching it and I'm like going, I never noticed how much he favors Ezra Miller. He could be Ezra Miller's like
Barry
dorky- Gogan, yes. And I'm like, he could be Ezra Miller's dorky brother. And then we get in the car and Anna's like, I didn't like the Ezra Miller character. I'm like, and I was just giggling to myself. I'm like, that wasn't actually Ezra Miller.
He had
And
to
she's like,
actually
"No."
show me to believe me. He was straight up like, that's not him. And I'm like, shut up. It is.
We've established that Barry Gogan is Ezra Miller without the cheekbones.
Yeah.
Like,
and
you can literally
literally,
just Photoshop the cheekbones off and they're the same person.
if you look up this poor man, the first search history is the guy from Eternals, Ezra Miller. I feel
right?
so bad for him. It's like and he did fine. The problem with the thing that didn't resonate with me with his character is that, again, they introduce an interesting philosophy and then they try to say, okay, here's where we're trying to go, but they don't follow through.
Exactly.
So they introduce the fact that they introduce his powers, have him turn and say, hey, I want to interfere and force these people to calm down, bring them to live in a utopia, and then when they come after him and the deviant comes after them, because he's talking about how much he cares about these people,
Yeah.
and then he's like, I'm going to make them all walk out
I'll
with
walk
guns,
out with guns, yeah.
and shoot this dangerous thing that literally only the
He has to
Eternals
be
can
talked.
beat.
He has to be talked into telling them to run.
Yeah, he
Yes.
has to be. Which I'm sitting there going, do you care about these people or not? And all it is, the way they resolve it is they have Gemma Chan look at him, and she's like, what the fuck, man? And then finally he's like, okay, fine, go. And he releases them just like that, and I'm like, wait, no. It's like that should have been a longer story arc.
Yeah.
That we could have fleshed out, or at the very least they could have done a thing where he has some sort of apprehensions.
Yes, at least show him hesitant to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like basically either show that he actually cares about these people and wants what's best for them, or show that he's been corrupted by the power and is willing to put them in danger, and at least let more of them die or something before he's like, wait a minute, I've been kind of silly. Just he was the start of me noticing that trend.
Yeah.
It's like,
Alright.
okay, so the one I want to do next is, and we'll just pair them together, Gilgamesh and Thena.
Gilgamesh and Thena. Okay. Definitely Angelina Jolie. I was going in. I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I trust that she's gonna put as much into this as she puts into other stuff. She did.
I liked
she did.
her.
I think
loved her in this.
She had the same level of intensity, you know that first scene in Maleficent where she wakes up with her wings missing and
she's
and
wailing.
you just wailing and I have not felt an Angelina Jolie thing like this since that movie, that scene. And that's how she I'm like, okay, yes.
Right, you're like, right. That's why she's here.
Oh yeah, so I kind of felt that she did a great job, and there was a little bit of some stuff about that. They weren't very clear on exactly what the deal is, because the whole thing with the Mad Weary, which is where they're trying to explain that their memories have been erased.
Their memories are routinely erased after they hop from planet to planet.
And so they were you kind of had to puzzle piece together exactly what the hell was going on with Thena.
Yeah.
Was this okay, so is she sick? Is she losing her memory and everything? And at one point in the movie that at least they could have followed up with, she was the turning point for Ajax. And you have to figure this out on your own because it's not really clear. She's the turning point of Ajax because when you originally find out that they're supposed to go back and get their memories erased, it's because Ajax has softened and decides that she doesn't want to reboot Thena.
Yeah, because the way you solve the Man Weary is actually to just erase it and try again. And the problem is she loves these guys.
Yes. And that was your first clue, but they don't really solidify that, oh, actually there's something more sinister with this than them just erasing it because she's getting overwhelmed by her memories.
And so what they decide to do in order to balance that is the only person who's able to beat her when she goes ballistic and starts attacking people is Gilgamesh.
Because he's the one who's got the super strength.
Yes, and he was great. And of course, of all the people that go, they're like, yeah, you like him, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I really like this character. And they're like, you sure?
Yeah,
it's like,
sure?
yeah. I was like, awesome. Like, stab.
Yeah.
Now, I did like the way they handled it. They didn't make the romance outwardly romantic to like a cheesy degree. It was like you knew he loved her and it didn't matter if she loved him. And she didn't really realize how much she loved him until she lost him.
Yeah, they do. It's like the one thing that I'm like, I didn't care, but I know if I see it brought up, I get why somebody else would care. They leaned a little too hard into the, hey, big guy, the sun's getting low. And I'm like, please don't. Not this again.
Yeah.
It's like, but it was...
Talking about Black Widow and Hulk, of course,
yes.
in the Avengers movies where only Black Widow can take him down.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically they have that kind of on top of having the strength connection, they have the emotional connection with each other that when she goes ballistic, literally the only person who has any sort of like influence over her is Gilgamesh, and then that comes back to haunt him later.
Yeah.
Dude, but not really.
But not really.
But not really.
All right, so let's talk about Kingo. Right?
Yes, okay. Yes, okay.
I've never seen this actor before. I know he's been on stuff and he's very popular.
He's a comedian.
And he's comedian.
He's really funny.
I
loved him in
like
this.
the second he popped up on the screen, I'm like, I am in love with this dude.
He's delightful.
He had the perfect the eyebrow, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun. This guy is gonna be fun.
And I love the whole Bollywood thing.
Whole Bollywood thing.
The Bollywood thing's delightful, and then he brings his assistant along.
Yeah. Now, the Bollywood thing is definitely one of the Neil Gaiman elements, is that Kingo is as living as a Hollywood star.
Yeah, he did. It's like, because he did, which, another humanity thing that interacts and doesn't happen. It's like, what he decides to do, everybody else, like, switches identities and changes names and changes locations. He decides that he is just going to be his grandfather, his father.
Yes, he becomes his own legacy.
Yeah, so he can still live in public and do the public things he enjoys doing, but now he doesn't really have to hide it as much anymore.
And I do love that his valet knows. He's like, oh, he's been living for like 50 years.
He is incredibly cool with it. I am shocked. Because this valet, it's like, he's another one of those emotional threads that it's like, that's what I want to know more about the two of them.
Yeah.
Because this guy goes through a lot. He manages, it's like he gets sent on this big thing where they're like, we are Eternals, we are what you guys consider old gods, and he just goes through very faithfully. His camera gets broken 3 times, and he keeps pulling it out.
He keeps on pulling out like a different camera, I think at one point he's even using his phone.
His phone, yeah.
Yeah, he's using his phone.
Please tell me you got that on film. Of course I did, sir.
Yeah, but then it's like he becomes like a very big part of like the emotional weight, because he's the audience stand-in.
Yeah.
He's the people stand-in. It's like, so
he's
anytime,
R2 and 3PO.
Yeah, so he has a lot of moments where it's like, oh, what are we gonna do? And he just sits there and he's like, why don't you guys do this? Or it's like, even at the end when they realize that maybe all of humanity is going to die, he's like, it's been an honor serving you guys. Like, it's like...
Thank you for everything you've done for us.
Thank you for trying.
Yeah, and then it's like, and then when one of them dies, he's actually the one that's leading the funeral. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, he's being very supportive of his valet doing all this stuff, and I'm like, wait, no, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
What? Like, it's one of those things where, like, the seeds are there, because even though they try to make him, like, a very superficial guy, or a guy that's become very superficial, that relationship shows that there's depth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of depth that we're not talking about, and it's fascinating.
And there's a lot of stuff that just gets kind of, like, hinted at, and they just don't have the time to really delve in.
Yeah, it's like, this is one of those, this would have been a fascinating longer one. It's like, but he's a delight. Like, the both of them practically carry the movie. God. It's like...
Okay, well, how about next we talk about Sprite?
Yeah, I was about to say, I finally had to look at the thing, and I'm like, right, we forgot about Sprite.
Well, I think that Sprite really works really well with the character that we just talked about, because it sounds like at one point they were together, and
they were buddies.
He finally abandoned her because he was sick of having to change every 5 years because Sprite doesn't age. And Sprite looks like a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, you know, he, like, 5 years is the most that they could stay in any one location.
Before someone's like, hey, wait a minute.
And he finally got tired of it, and he was like, he ditches Sprite to have his own life, and that's when he does the Bollywood.
And that's another one of those major, like I said, I didn't finish the Neil Gaiman version of the Eternals, but that was the biggest plot thread in the whole thing, was the Sprite. It came from Sprite wanting to grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I knew that by the end of this that was going to happen, because
I knew it was going to happen.
They're going to be able to keep the actor that age forever anyway.
I knew it was going to happen. This isn't even an issue with the plot. This is my own personal bias. The way they decided to go about how she carries it out had me like, okay, whatever.
Okay, you're right. That was kind of a pull it up
that specific set of turnarounds.
The actual method by which it did happen was kind of a little bit of a plot armor thing.
And we'll talk about it more when we get to the last character. But it's like, basically she has a very specific turnaround that, again, emotionally consistent, because she doesn't just want to grow up, but she wants a consistent family, because basically she has to get
love, because she's in love with Icarus.
Yeah, but she gets hopped around a bunch, and she's like, I just want my family to be together and do stuff. And of course she's in love with Icarus, and she's like, oh, I'm going to murder my entire family to be with Icarus. And I'm like, for a man, really? It was one of those things where it's like,
that being said, everything was amazingly well acted, I felt.
Felt fantastic.
Yeah, we've never...
You felt the emotions, you felt the desires, and the you know.
I knew where they were going with each of them.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can talk about Icarus.
All right, Icarus is the last one.
No, there's one more after Icarus. But anyways.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
No, we'll deal with that in a minute.
We'll deal with that in a minute. Okay.
Second to last.
Icarus is the last Eternal. And I enjoyed him. I mean, it didn't hurt that he's so easy on the eyes, and I love the Scottish accent.
He's cute.
There were elements where I felt like he was a tool.
But yeah,
he was a tool.
Well, and that's the thing. And they established that at the beginning, that he's definitely the you know, the Major Domo character. He's definitely the toe-the-line faithful soldier, and you knew that from the beginning.
Bound by duty.
Yeah, bound by duty. Yeah,
which was fine, except they leaned. It's like, because we try to talk about these beforehand, because they know that some of these I don't know what they are. And so when he explained the powers to me, it's like, his thing is that he's a good general guy. He's good at, it's like, basically all of them have the same powers, but they picked a thing to specialize in. And so I'm thinking, okay, so he's generally good at everything, and what they decide to interpret that as is he's the Superman allegory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't do this again, man.
Yeah.
I've seen too many of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they even call him out on it in the middle of it. Look, the kid calls him
That's what
Superman.
made it so funny.
Yeah.
It's like, are you Superman? And I'm like, don't make it obvious.
Isn't that like the first mention of DC characters in the Marvel Universe cinematic?
I think that they've done
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
They've done a couple of hints.
I was kind of surprised.
And I mean, of course, if you want to say any Marvel movie, then of course there's Deadpool, where he was like.
Well, yeah, no, that doesn't count. I meant like I actually was a little bit surprised that they blatantly talked
They straight up was like, "You look like Superman." It's like, shut up, kid.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting because there's a lot of really weird meta debate as to what the role. You read it sometimes. It's just really, you can go down a major rabbit hole. But what the role of superhero media is inside a world where superheroes exist.
Right.
It's like what are
the rules here?
Yeah, what are the rules?
Because
Really interesting. Marvel actually did a series that I liked. It was called Marvel's Comics, and basically it was a series of comic books written by people who live in Marvel Comics. And they basically wrote what they thought were the origins of the superheroes. So imagine living in a world where superheroes are real, and you're writing comic books about these superheroes. Well, obviously you don't know.
Cute.
Obviously you don't know Spider-Man's real name or real origin or identity, but they're writing stories
that is actually
about
cute.
what they are guessing is Spider-Man's origin and story.
Are they hilarious?
And there's some funny ones, yeah.
Okay,
and the Spider-Man in it is actually kind of cool. He's a lot meaner, but anyway. But they do a series of comic books, like what are the comic books inside Marvel's universe,
right?
And it's like a whole series of them. But yeah, I was kind of wondering about that. It's like, are there superheroes inside the superhero world? Because you don't really need superhero comic books when you have real superheroes. So what are comic books?
Yeah, but you would still tell stories about them, as you can see by the Eternals being represented in the gods that we think they are.
Well, so if you ever read Watchmen, they don't have superhero comic books in the Watchmen world. They still have comic books, but they don't do the superhero genre.
Yeah, the Superman thing, I'd be like, what are the rules?
Yeah.
It's but...
And of course, in the Milestone universe, it's DC Comics.
And Milestone, they all read DC comic books. Except that was before they got merged in, but still,
but it's very... It's like, and yeah, it's like, basically, if you have seen any... evil Superman story, evil duty-bound Superman, specifically the evil one who's duty-bound, you get it.
You get it.
You're gonna see all of the twists of his character a mile away.
Yeah, and we're not saying he's evil, because we're not going to give you all of this stuff, but he definitely becomes antagonistic.
The morally gray character.
He actually does present an obstacle. And
also the end of that is silly.
Bankrupt.
Yes.
Like, I understand why. Again, I get the story plot, but how his character pays off, I'm like, oh.
You know what? When it happened, I'm like, of course this is how it happened. It couldn't have happened any other way. Like, I'm sure they probably tried writing 30 other ways, and it always just came back to this. I accepted it.
Right? It's like Icarus.
Icarus.
I think
what else is going to happen to Icarus?
We gonna talk about him.
I think it's time to go on to the next character, which is our last character.
This is the
extra and gotten more press than any of the other characters. Which
is so funny.
It wasn't
so funny.
super obvious.
I didn't realize that Dane Whitman was being played by Kit Harington. And I'm like, really? You haven't seen like the hundreds of memes of Kit Harington and Richard Madden together, and like, we'll see you in eternity. And they're at the wall in Game of Thrones. It's like, I'll see you in eternity, and then it's like, here's eternity. And so it amuses me that like literally of all, even over like Greg pointed out, even over Angelina Jolie, Kit Harington has been getting all of the credit, or all of the press and attention.
I never watched Game of Thrones, so he wasn't one of those characters that super stood out to me.
I never watched Game of Thrones. The only characters that I knew were from Game of Thrones were Kit Harington, because I see him on shit all the time, and the guy who was in Inhumans, the guy who played Maximus in Inhumans. I forgot his name.
No,
his name is Ian something. Ian something. And of course, the chick. But even then, Bo had to explain to me that the chick on Star Wars movie was Dragon Woman.
Yeah, basically that problem.
I didn't even know that was her, because when she had black hair with the dark hair, I had no idea who that was.
I kept track of the girls.
Amelia Clark.
I knew
Amelia
Jason
Clark,
Momoa existed in the series.
Jason Momoa, yes, of course, everybody knows him.
It's like I knew those, but literally Kit Harington was so which, yes, fight me about it later. I'm not taking questions at this time. Question, Kit Harington was so forgetful for me in the stuff that I knew about Game of Thrones that, yeah, it was one of those, like, my brain went, yeah, I guess he's familiar, but it didn't make the final connection where they're like, by the way, that's the dude from Game of Thrones. It's like, oh.
And what I find frustrating is after all the hype and all of the buzz and everything like that, and he's in the movie like 5 or 6 times. So he's in there
and
a
they
bit.
make it blatantly obvious.
And every single time, they give you another clue of who he is.
Not even a clue. They're straight up telling you who he is.
Greg is upset that there wasn't a literal, like, there wasn't...
He's not in his superhero costume.
He's not in his superhero costume. He doesn't do... Here's my thing. I think that they did more than they should have, personally. Like, after the first two hints, I'm like, oh, Easter egg. Oh, they did it again. I'm excited. I'm like,
I'm bad at picking these up. If I
sorry.
don't know
I agree with you. That's why I'm so upset. It's because they showed him so much that by the time...
he was going to get involved in the story, maybe?
Possibly with how much they were buzzing on it. And, I mean...
Because that was like borderline backdoor pilot, is what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
It was like...
I know.
It basically was.
But then I will say I loved the scene of the ebony blade, but I wanted to see him in his costume I was like, okay, you've been teasing us this whole movie.
They're not going to show him in the
and
costume.
you didn't even give us any payoff.
They're not going to do that because they have to save something for when he gets his own spin-off movie.
Yeah,
I already knew that was going to happen.
Is he getting his own spin-off?
He's going to be in something else.
Well,
Given what the twist was, they might as well.
Do you want me to spoil it?
Hold on, I'm going to give you two twists. I guarantee you. Go. Yes. Okay, so in the end, he leaves and somebody says, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Now,
nobody recognizes his voice.
If you're familiar with the character of the Black Knight, which is what we're getting to, is Dane Whitman, a.k.a. the Black Knight. In fact, when they first announced him, everybody goes, oh, poor Kit Harington, he's just going to go from one medieval thing to another medieval thing, let's like give this guy some range or whatever. So ever since the beginning,
we're going to make him a superhero knight.
There is a superhero knight. And I like
we're changing it up, guys.
I like the character of Black Knight and everything. But I was like, Merlin's involved heavily in that story. We're going to have, MCU's version of Merlin. That's who I thought it was. That's who me and my husband thought it was. But
it wasn't.
But then we find out it was who? Yes, definitely spoiled because I got something to say about it.
Yeah, it was Blade.
So Midnight Suns is coming. But
that's what I wanted to know.
So Blade, supposedly from what I understand, Black Knight's going to show up in the Blade movie.
No, hold on. I just learned they have confirmed that Mahershala Ali will be appearing in the Moon Knight series as Blade before his own movie.
Cool.
That asks the confusing follow-up question: are they two? Is he the Nick Fury character in Midnight Suns? And also, are they trying to make him that character?
Doctor Strange is the core character for Midnight Suns. He's the one who connects them all together.
Oh.
So, big question is maybe Black Knight's going to show up in Moon Knight then?
That's what I'm thinking.
Because
Moon Knight's another of the Midnight Suns. Isn't he?
Moon Knight was, yes. Moon Knight was on a later incarnation of it. Yeah. He was actually on a couple of incarnations of it.
Well, you don't have the Marvel movies grab
but you don't have
all of them.
Yeah. Like you said, Mod Podge. Yeah. But my thing is this, they can't have Blade on the Moon Knight series and not have Jack Russell. Okay. They just can't. They just can't. Well. Jack Russell is
already here.
So, for you guys who don't know who Jack Russell is, we're talking about Werewolf by Night.
Yes, Werewolf by Night. Or just as he's known in the comic books, the Werewolf. Yeah, they can't not have him in it because he is so connected to Moon Knight's mythos. Yeah. And if you're going to have the other supernatural beings in there, if you're going to have Blade in there...
Well, Moon Knight was created in the Werewolf by Night series.
Yes.
So. Well, and it's like that's kind of the other added stress that I'm feeling right now. Because again, basically the big inciting incident of how he decides to take up the mantle again is this giant celestial pops up in the middle of nowhere,
Peekaboo.
And everyone's like, "Oh my God, what the hell is that?"
Right.
And he steals his girlfriend, and so he comes back and he's like, "I have to save the world, guys." And then he gets the, "Are you sure about that?" And once I finally connected that it's another heroes assemble thing. So we've got multiverse, we've got space
So
politics.
you think Blade's going around collecting the supernaturals?
That's what I'm thinking is happening. And that's why I'm like, are
Okay.
we trying to make him the Nick Fury character?
Okay, I
That'd
see
be
what you're
hilarious.
saying.
I'm super stressed
I see what
out
you're saying. 'Cause,
because
like,
we have
yeah.
those, and then we have the Young Avengers, and then we have the Dark Avengers, and now we're gonna have the Midnight Suns on top of it. And I'm like, we're going too fast, guys.
Which is
We're-
basically Magic Avengers for those.
yeah, Magic Avengers, and it's stressing me out because
Which,
too
of
many
course, in
things
the
are
DC
happening.
universe is Dark Justice League.
Justice League Dark.
So,
Or well, and for anybody who wants to split hairs, technically we're getting Dark Avengers and we're getting the Thunderbolts, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, or some.
I'm
mush
just
mush.
super stressed out, guys.
yeah,
This is a lot to have to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
But, you know,
It was cool though.
We
I just
enjoyed
kind
the
of felt like
movies.
this ended, and it was just kind of like
The only thing
that's
that
it.
really had any kind of impact was the Black Knight.
Well, no, I mean, like, you know, so basically the
'Cause
Celestial
that's
comes.
what I felt.
The Celestial came, kidnapped all of the Eternals that were on the planet, and then, like, well, I guess we need to say Patton Oswalt is pissed.
Oh, yeah, by the way,
okay,
Starbucks
by
was
the way,
there.
Starbucks was there.
By the way, he was there. It was
With
fine.
they somehow get on the ship with the other Eternals when the other Eternals are out searching, and you know they say, "Hey, we haven't heard from the other Eternals that are on Earth for a couple of weeks.
Right.
We
We
gotta
should
turn
go
around
back."
and go back." And then Star Fox shows up. Again.
Literally,
So-
da-da-da-da, and
we
they
forgot-
make him walk down the hall.
Who we forgot to mention, as
By
we're
the way,
giving
I'm
you
sorry,
all of the
everybody.
history, all of the history of the Eternals in the comic books, and we told you the super cool thing about Thanos being half Eternal, half deviant from the moon of Titan, as they had settled it. Well, his brother was another famous Avenger by the name of Star Fox.
By the way, he's also there.
Yes, and so Star Fox, who's born Eros of Titan, was the complete opposite of Thanos in every way. He was handsome and charming. His actual power is that he's so charming that he can manipulate people's emotions. And he is a womanizer and a partier, and he just completely abandoned all of his responsibilities on the planet Titan.
Literally party Thor.
He's Party Thor, yeah, and he went away, and Thanos destroyed his home, and then he ends up getting recruited into the Avengers to help fight Thanos. So, anyway, he shows up at the end, played by Harry Styles. I was not even expecting that at all. Like, when I'd only even seen that they had cast him, like, 2 weeks ago. I had no idea he was going to be in the movie. Like, I figured
My
he was
brain
gonna-
didn't even process
I
it.
was
I was
ready
like,
for
all
him.
right, whatever, man.
Well, because they announced his casting not long after they announced the casting for Adam Warlock. So I just
Yeah.
assumed they were both going to show up in Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
And they were like, oh no, never mind.
And then, like,
He's literally in
boom,
this.
He's in there. And my last thing I want to say is that I love the costumes, and I love this interpretation of Star Fox's costumes. But
It is cool looking.
they've got those circles on everything.
Everything.
Everything is a circle. Everything in the spaceship is swirly with circles. The costumes are swirly with circles.
Even the
The
ending credits are swirly.
the credits are
circles.
the technology is swirly with circles. Now, there were two things that Anna and I were actually kind of disappointed that they didn't, in some way or another, connect to. One was Shang-Chi. All right, as I mentioned before, how much
Space dragons.
as mentioned before, how much I love Quasar and how the bracers come from, and they're kind of Shang-Chi-y. Well, in the comic book, the space dragons, the 10 rings are actual rings, but in the movie, they made them into actual, these circle things, which look like the technology that Fastos makes. So
Yeah.
I'm like, why didn't we explain why these look just like this? He's making all this technology with all of these circles, and I'm like, that looks suspiciously like the
Right.
things that Shang-Chi was using.
And that's the shock because it doesn't connect to. It's
they-
like basically you don't
Well,
make
also,
a connection.
They don't
in
make a
Shang-Chi,
connection.
and in Shang-Chi, they were supposedly sending off a signal into space.
into space, right?
So
Yeah.
there's no payoff in this
There's
movie.
no payoff in this movie for that.
Well, 'cause that's what I thought was
who
gonna
got the
happen.
signal? Yes, exactly.
That's what I thought was going to happen.
Who's
Is they were
receiving
like,
the signal?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
by the way, this thing's happening. We're gonna basically. That's what I thought they were gonna do. Is they were gonna have different beacons that were gonna
Yes.
randomly go off. That something was coming. I thought that was gonna be the connection. They're like, no, by
No,
the
no,
way,
no.
Black Knight. We're gonna introduce Midnight Suns and have like a super traumatic ending.
Yeah. There's that.
Just
Okay, and then
Yeah.
the last thing was we were talking about the portrayal of the Celestials in the Marvel Cinematic Universe up to this point, especially in Guardians of the Galaxy. And even though they were a little bit more homogenized in this movie, they still reinforced the concept of the Celestials as they were in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, which makes Ego in the second Guardians of the Galaxy,
which is supposedly a Celestial.
And in the comic book, he was not a Celestial. I know, my husband and I are having an argument. They eventually made him an honorary New World Celestial, but he was not originally
This doesn't
Celestial.
count.
I don't think he counts. And it's the fact that Ego is so radically different in every way, shape, and form from the other Celestials is not addressed. And that needs to be addressed because it's bugging the tar out of me. Especially with this movie. And I'm not going to spoil the great big gigantic twist, if you want to call it. But they pulled something out that really surprised me. Like, I'm usually, even just reading rabbit hole stuff, I pick up enough of things that I know the plot lines and things for story threads for comics and stuff. I can usually figure out, oh, this is which story they're referring to. This is which one they're referring to. They pulled a story plot line out of an alternate universe thing that is so far removed from the main Marvel comics that I was shocked. Just shocked. I'm like, wow, they went there. That was such a super surprise. I should have seen it coming, especially by watching the movie. But it was such a thing from such another thing. I just like...
Right, if I saw it coming, you should have seen it coming.
It didn't cross my mind. I put it out of my head and everything. But that one thing puts that final nail in that Ego the Living Planet coffin. Because, like, well, if this is the Celestials, if this is where the Celestials come from...
Then what are you?
Then this is nowhere near that. Especially since Ego tried destroying the Earth. Which is completely against the Celestials.
Yeah.
And that's my
It's a huge plot hole. But we have bored you guys long enough.
It's a living planet-sized plot hole.
Right.
It's like we have kept you guys here long enough.
Yeah.
We
could
love
go
you.
on for more. But,
We could.
We could.
But we won't. Because we
We'll
love
try
you.
But
not
again,
to.
I think because we've talked about it so much, I think that it shows that the movie has a lot of
It made an
elements
impact.
that's worth watching.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Watch it.
Yeah,
And,
like if they follow through on anything, I'm totally happy to hear more.
And if they don't follow through on some of those things...
I'm going to be very
We're
disappointed in you.
gonna
I just want to talk.
We're going to march.
I just want to talk.
So, but again, I mean, it's pretty amazing what they were able to pull off with this movie, considering how many characters there were.
Yeah.
And they were still able to make you feel about certain characters.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody had their own favorites, characters that they latched onto. But yeah. So
Right.
you guys take care.
Thank
Have
you
a
for joining
really
us.
wonderful day.
Yeah.
And
Like, follow, subscribe, and we will see you next week. I don't know what's coming, but I'm sure it'll be awesome.
We'll figure something out.
All right.
oh, we've got so many plans.
Yeah. All the plans.
All the plans of ever.
Yeah. All right.